Welcome to the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. I'm the sports editor of the Herald Democrat, Jason Del Rosa, and you're listening to the latest edition of the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. We are in week 9 of the high school football season. That means we have 3 games left maximum for several teams. A couple teams only have 2 games left because they still have their bye. We don't have any playoff teams in our area just yet. That's probably going to change after the games of this week. We will talk about all that, what happened last week in week 8 to get us here. And as always, here on the podcast, you get all your information thanks to Frontier Golf Carts Texoma. Experience the thrill of savings to celebrate their new Denison location, proudly serving the greater Texoma area, where they're launching with the lowest prices of the year. This marks an exciting new chapter in the 11-year history of Frontier Golf Carts as they expand from their original location in Salina. For their grand opening, come see the awesome collection of new carts with up to $1,500 off, including the 2024 Frontier EV Lightning F4 with all seats facing forward. New lithium battery-powered golf carts with backup cameras and touchscreen entertainment start at $7,495. Visit frontiergolfcarts.com or check out their Facebook page for the latest specials. And if you would like to sponsor the podcast, or you know someone who might want to sponsor the podcast, contact Renee Marler at rmarler@cherryroad.com. We're going all the way till the last team is standing. Usually that's deep into December, so we still got 2.5 months of podcasts for everybody to enjoy. So come join Frontier Golf Carts Texoma and sponsor the podcast if you so choose. As we always do, we talk about all the teams. We start from the top. We work our way down to the bottom. From 5A down to 6-man. We've got everything in between. And we will start with one of those teams that has a bye this week, that being the Sherman Bearcats. They finally get to their bye after playing 8 games in a row. They are going to enter their bye off a 52-7 loss to Frisco Lone Star. This was a game at Toyota Stadium. Head on down to another Frisco venue. And unfortunately for Sherman, we talked about it in the preview, you have to deal with one of the best teams, not just in the district as the defending district champion, but as the number 2 team in the state based on various polls, who's undefeated, have a handful of high Division I talent, and they jumped out to a 21-0 lead in the first quarter on the way to that 52-7 win over Sherman. Sherman does avoid the shutout, getting a 53-yard touchdown pass from A.J. Carney to Colby Ray Short early in the fourth quarter. But outside of that, it was very tough sledding against a very good team. A lot of people have had trouble. We talked. They had a couple of close games, including against an Argyle team that is ranked in the top 10 in 5A Division II. But for the most part, they've had their way with a lot of opponents, and this was a game, like we said, the halftime score wasn't terrible. It was only 28-0, and Lone Star took advantage of some turnovers and some short fields to get that early lead. And then we're able to kind of to pull things away, in part because, again, Sherman having their struggles. They had the one big pass play, but for the most part, there wasn't anything consistent from Sherman. There were 3 turnovers, and they weren't able to really to keep Lone Star off the field for extended periods. And obviously, if you're gonna try to keep the score as close as possible, you've got to pick up some first downs. You've got to milk some of the clock. And I thought Sherman did a good job of that. They just weren't able to get that second first down or even that first down to kind of to melt some of that time away. Colby Ray Short with 2 catches for 65 yards and the touchdown. Also had 10 carries for 31 yards. Kane Bowen 6 carries for 27 yards. Micah Hunt with 3 catches for 26 yards. Carney finishes 5 of 12 passing for 91 yards and the touchdown and an interception in place of Caleb Orr, who was injured in the game against Frisco the prior week. And we will see where that stands for their next game, which will be next Thursday at home against Frisco Wakeland. Sherman actually finishes with 2 Thursday games. They end on the road at Lebanon Trail. And so they've got not as long a break. They've obviously got a short week the second week. But going into this bye week, the number one question would be, what is the quarterback situation and the status of Caleb Orr? Would he be back in time to, one, get the reps needed, and then two, be available to play? Obviously, that's going to be the last home game. He being a senior, is that something that he tries to get back for, or do they stick with Carney potentially for the last couple games, depending on how things play out? Sherman's in a situation where they're not eliminated yet, which is crazy to say when you are talking about a team that is currently tied for 8th place. They have the 2-6 overall record. They are 1-5 in district play. If they do win out and they were to get to 3-5, right now there is a potential that 15 things have to happen, certain scores have to go their way. There's a chance that they are still alive right now. By the time the games get played on Friday, they probably will not be. Basically, if McKinney North wins one more game, that will eliminate Sherman. Some other people will still be alive in the middle of the standings. But as of going into the games on Friday in this district, Sherman is technically still alive. We had talked about it the last couple weeks of, if they could get on a run, if they could beat some of these teams that were in front of them, if they could beat a Frisco, if they could beat a Heritage, they would be squarely in the mix. They would be tied for 5th place and a game behind the last playoff spot, with a chance to play Wakeland, who currently is in 3rd, and to beat a Lebanon Trail team that they would be tied with at this point. And so it was right there. Unfortunately, they dropped the last couple, and obviously the Lone Star game, we kind of knew that was going to be a tough one. But if they won 4 of the 2 games on either side of that game against Lone Star, they would stay in the mix. And unfortunately, that has not happened. So if you're Sherman, you have this bye week at such a late time. It's not as late as it could be for some of the other teams that we have in our area that have the last week of the season off. But you've got 2 games left. They're both on Thursdays. They're both significant games in terms of, you have your last home game of the season. You have a winnable game for a team that might still be in the mix, depending on what happens over the next couple of weeks going into that last game. So at the very least, you want to be able to come off this bye week, have your best foot forward, finish on a strong note. We have seen Sherman teams do that in the past. They have gone into these last couple of weeks where it doesn't mean anything for them in terms of a playoff spot, but they have played well. They have earned wins, and you want to get as much positive momentum despite the fact that you're in the situation right now. So it will be interesting to see what things look like after the bye for Sherman. It did look like a couple other guys got hurt, but in the game against Lone Star, I'll have to double check as we get closer to game time next week to see if some of those guys will be back. So it'll be interesting to see who's available and who's not, and that's probably the biggest thing for Sherman down the stretch if they want to have some positive momentum, maybe get a win, and again play spoiler for 2 teams that right now are still in the mix. We'll see what they can do when they get back off this bye and they host Wakeland next Thursday, which is Halloween night, by the way, and that's the reason that they're playing on Thursday, is they have a chance to have some fun with that, I think, just from a planning purpose and all that surrounds Halloween, to be able to play on Thursday instead of Friday next week. So we'll see what happens with Sherman when they get back to action next week against Frisco Wakeland at home. Moving over to the other 5A team, of course, the Denison Yellow Jackets. They have won 2 in a row as they hit the home stretch. They are coming off a 49-0 victory against Frisco Liberty. They are now 2-5 and 2-3 in District 4 5A Division II action, and they had a very similar scenario compared to what they did against Frisco Memorial the week before that. They got off to a good start. They got special teams touchdowns. They got a defensive touchdown. They got a balanced offensive performance. They overcame some issues, but again, they were much better than the opponent on the field, which is what we thought they would be. Again, this was a Liberty team that has not won a game in over 3 years. They are likely on their way to a third straight 0-10 season, and Denison took advantage of that. They carried the momentum from that win over Memorial. They did not overlook this opponent. They went down on a Thursday night on a short schedule and came away with a big win. Ty Rhodes, 10 carries for 110 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was also 8 of 15 passing for 96 yards and an interception. Jalen Butler, 9 carries for 85 yards and a touchdown. Special teams got 2 blocked punt returns for touchdowns. Both of those were blocked by Caden Sanders. Roman Henderson got the first one, returned at 19 yards for a touchdown. Alex Camacho got the last one, returned at 10 yards for a score. Shandon Love had a 46-yard interception return for a touchdown. Henderson also added a touchdown run on the ground. And again, the Denison defense, in addition to that interception, had 2 fumble recoveries. They held Liberty to barely 200 yards. They only gave up, they gave up 2 big plays of passing plays. One was 47 yards and one was 46 yards. And if you take, and that was almost half of Liberty's offense on 2 plays. They did a really good job. They blocked a field goal. Caden Sanders again involved in that or in the first quarter after one of those big passing plays to keep the game scoreless. So that ended up preserving the shutout in the long run. And again, another good performance. We talked about off the bye. These were 2 games. Not only did you have a chance to win, you had a chance to really win comfortably, and they did that. Now the schedule gets tougher, and it gets a lot tougher because you're going to play probably 3 playoff teams. You're probably going to play maybe the 3 best teams on your schedule. If not, it's 3 of the top 4, depending on how the standings shake out. And that is with them welcoming the Anna Coyotes or the Coyotes, depending on how you want to say it. I say Coyotes. They come to town at Munson Stadium, 7 o'clock on Friday. They are 4-3 and 3-2 in district. And you say, well, they're 4-3. That's not exactly a great record. They've already played Lovejoy as the top team in the district. They've already played Melissa, who was tied for second place. They lost both of those games super close down to the wire. They lost to Lovejoy by 4. They lost to Melissa by 3. So they could easily only have the 1 loss, and the 1 loss is a close one in non-district to a team from Tennessee. So they could easily be 7-0 at this point. They could easily be undefeated in this district. And we've talked about at the beginning of the season, this is a program that won the 4A Division I state championship before moving up in the latest realignment. A lot of the guys that they replaced were on defense, and that's kind of shown because they've played a lot of shootouts, but a lot of the offensive guys came back, and that is also shown because they're scoring a ton of points. And last week is a perfect example of that. They beat Walnut Grove 55-41 to give Walnut Grove not only their first loss in district, but their first loss of the season. So Anna comes into this matchup right now. Currently, they have their hands on the 4th seed. Lovejoy's 5-0. Walnut Grove and Melissa are 4-1. Anna is 3-2, and Emerson is 3-3. They've already beaten Emerson, so they have the tiebreaker over them, and they're facing a team that Denison has lost to a couple of the teams in front of them, with Lovejoy and Melissa still to come. But if you look at the standings, and like we said, Denison is 2-3, so there's a chance that things are still in play for Denison. Now, is it going to be extremely hard? Yes. They have to, like I said, they have to beat the district leader. They have to beat one of the teams tied for second, and they have to beat currently the 4th place team. But they are in the mix based on their record, and that's what makes this game big for both sides. If there's a chance after Friday, if Denison were to win, you would have a tie going into those last couple games, and Who knows what might happen? Stranger things have happened. But obviously, Anna's feeling good about themselves the last couple of weeks. They have done what they felt they needed to do to get into the playoffs after having those losses to Lovejoy and Melissa off the start. The Anna Emerson game was a huge swing game. They won that one 44-31 before beating Walnut Grove last week, and a lot of people thought that Walnut Grove was going to get the upper hand there. And you have a soft landing for them at the end of their schedule. They finish with Memorial and Liberty. So this is a huge game for them to more or less clinch a playoff spot. They would have to win one more or have Emerson lose one more to officially have the tiebreaker over them. But they're chasing a higher seed as well. If they end up tied with Walnut Grove, they would have the tiebreaker there. So they can't afford to slip up, and I think they know that. You have a lot of kids in this game, like I said, for Anna, that have played in big games, that are aware of what's at stake, and you don't want to say Denison the final 3 games is in a spoiler role. They basically are. But if they were to pull off something, they'd have to win. They'd have to win out to have a chance, and even winning out may not get them in because of the games that they've already lost. But this game is a game of consequence, and it's at home, and you have a chance to knock off some of the people that are in the mix. And so it's gonna be interesting to see if Denison can kind of keep this offensive momentum going. I think defensively it's good that they've actually not allowed a point for 10 quarters dating back to the second half of the Walnut Grove game. But this may be the best offense. It's definitely the best offense I've seen so far. I don't Lovejoy may have something to say about that. So might Melissa. But just based on the games that Anna's played, they've had to put up points, and and even in the games they haven't, they've put up a ton of points. They're really good offensively with that group from last year. So it's going to be interesting to see what Denison can do. If they can get a third straight win, if they can just play well down the stretch against some of these teams that, especially with Lovejoy and Melissa, that they haven't had success against in the past. Just maybe to play well going into the offseason. You got off the schneid with the losses. You got a couple wins. They were very nice wins. You had a good, almost month of time with the bye, and then coming into this game of, hey, we weren't as bad as everybody said. We showed we had some really good moments, and if you can find a way to shock some people this week, then who knows what those last 2 games could really end up meaning. So we'll see what happens at Munson Stadium, 7 o'clock on Friday, as Denison hosts Anna. We've got a couple of really good games at the lower levels. Obviously, Anna Denison's big. It means something for the playoffs. It means something for both teams. We've got a couple of games down here that mean a lot for a lot of people in terms of district titles. And the first game in that regard is at the 4A level in District 5 4A Division 2 as Van Alstyne travels to Farmersville. Farmersville is 3-0 in district play. They're 4-3 overall after they won last week 48-11 against Gainesville. And Farmersville is also 3-0. They're 6-1 on the season. They won 29-23 against Cattle Mills. And this is for sole possession of first place. The winner of this game is probably the district champion. Everybody else in this district has 2 losses. Cattle Mills and Sanger are both at 2-2. Crum is at 1-2. And then Gainesville and Bonham both have 3 losses. Gainesville's 0-3. Gainesville's 1-3. Bonham's 0-3. And you have 2 teams that are playing very well right now. We obviously had the hiccup with Van Alstyne in non-district play. They've gotten better every week in terms of the defense. They've been still at that level offensively. It took a little while to get going against Gainesville this last week. It was a 7-5 game at halftime, and then Van Alstyne scored 41 points in the second half. Leading the way, Brady Carson, 13 carries for 122 yards and 3 touchdowns. He also was just 2 of 2 passing for 92 yards, but one of them was a touchdown, 67 yards to Tim Moore, who had 2 catches for 75 yards. Michael Upchurch also had a touchdown run. Knox Wilson returned a fumble, 16 yards for a score. Braden Miller had a 32-yard touchdown run. He had 8 carries for 56 yards. And it was, outside of the first game against Waxahachie Life, when they pitched a shutout, and you obviously can't get better than that. I think this was obviously their best defensive effort of the season. 2 of those points were a safety, so that doesn't go against the defense. So the defense basically gave up 9 points, and you couldn't ask for a better setup going into, like I said, the biggest game of the season. There's a really good chance the winner of this clinches a playoff spot, no matter who it is, based on some other results in the district. But you're in first place. You'll have the tiebreaker over the other team, and like I said, you'd have a 2-game lead on everybody else with 2 games to play. Now, Van Alstyne still has to play Cattle Mills, so that would be a potential scenario there. If they were to lose, that Cattle Mills would be right behind them. But both of these teams are probably going to make the playoffs. And like I said, the winner's in really good shape for the district title, the top seed, and that's the big deal. Now, Van Alstyne's dominated this series recently. They've won 15 of the last 16 meetings, including last year, which was a competitive game, 27-14. And obviously, both teams know what's at stake. Farmersville's won 6 games in a row. They lost to Blue Ridge to open the season, 39-30. And since then, they haven't lost. They have played a lot of close games. 4 of their wins are by 10 points or less, and obviously the loss was by 9 points. So 5 of their 7 games have been down to the wire, in the balance in the fourth quarter, and we'll see. So we'll see if that kind of trend sticks with them. But this is like I said, this is a huge game. This is probably going to decide the district title, and we'll see what happens. It's going to be very interesting to see how things shake out with Van Alstyne. It's on the road, so you never know. But this is a 7:00 game on Friday. Van Alstyne visiting Farmersville with first place at stake in District 5-4A Division 2. Moving down to the 3A level, we have the Pottsboro Cardinals going on the road in 6-3A Division 1 to take on Pilot Point. Pottsboro is 7-1 overall and 3-1 in district play after they won 55-8 against Dallas A+ Academy. And Pilot Point is coming off its bye. The Bearcats are 2-5 and 2-1 in district play. This is a game we haven't seen in a while. 2017 was the last time that these two guys played each other. And this is a critical game. I hate to say, but they're probably we hate to say that every game is going to be a critical game at this point in the season, but they kind of are, just based on the standings and who still has who left to play and all that sort of stuff. Pottsboro's won the last 4 meetings. Pilot Point last beat Pottsboro in 2009, so it's been a while. If Pottsboro wins, they clinch a playoff spot, so that's obviously something big to play for. They're trying to hang around in case Palmer slips up. It doesn't look like that's going to happen. Obviously, we'll get to Palmer and Whitesboro in the game that they played last week next. So, but if you're Pottsboro, you're still in a good spot to clinch a playoff berth. You can get that out of the way and get that done this week just by winning. None of the other results matter in the district. As long as you win, you're in. And they're coming off. We said it was going to be a bounce back game. We didn't know how bad it was going to be just because of you're playing a team that hasn't won any games. It was 48-0 at halftime, and Pottsboro kind of took their foot off the gas, so it wasn't as bad as it probably could have been. But for the first half, again, they took advantage of a couple turnovers. Grayson West had a 45-yard interception return for a score. Brock Hill returned a fumble, 26 yards for a score, so they got 14 points. They could have won the game right there off their defense alone. But again, very good offensive effort, as always, when you're talking about Pottsboro. And they didn't have to do a whole lot of plays with it because of the defense and because of some quick scores. Caden Humphrey only had 2 carries for 34 yards. Didn't really need to do a whole lot, but one of them was a touchdown run. He was also 4 of 7 passing, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it gained 138 yards because of those big touchdown plays. Also had an interception to go with 3 touchdown passes. Garrett Doris, 2 catches for 82 yards, scored on both of them. Xavier Brady's lone catch was a 45-yard touchdown. You kind of catch the drift there of how this game was going. Carson Nix, 4 carries for 33 yards and a touchdown run as well. Braden Sheffield scored the only touchdown in the second half for Pottsboro, and they were able to get back on track, which is what we kind of expected. And again, you have a team in Pilot Point that came into the season on a long losing streak. They have beaten 2 of the bottom teams in this district. They are in position for a playoff spot, like we have mentioned the last couple of weeks based off of that. And they are going to, their big game is going to be against the Life Oak Cliff. That's probably going to decide the 4th playoff spot. But again, if you're Pottsboro, you've just got to stay the course. You got to go down to Pilot Point, get a winning clinch, kind of hang around. Then you go into your bye because you finish with the Battle of the Boroughs, and depending on how things go with Whitesboro, there's a chance that we're talking about the winner of that gets second place, the loser gets third. How does that affect the bracket based off of the result of that? And you're looking at probably both of those. Their only losses are against Palmer, who is in first place at 4-0. So that's where Pottsboro is. Again, going on the road, 7:30 on Friday against Pilot Point in a fun renewal of that series. There were some really good games when they were playing, when they were in a district together. I remember there was the one game that had to be delayed till Saturday because of heavy rains, and they had to play in the mud, and it was just a disaster. But it was a beautiful disaster. It was the way football was to be played. But they had some good meetings before that. Before Pilot Point got shipped out to a western district, and Pilot Point and Pottsboro got sent to the east. So that'll be the matchup: Pottsboro at Pilot Point in 6-3A Division I action. And the other game in this district, as we've said, Whitesboro follows Pottsboro's schedule, so they have a trip to Dallas A+ Academy, who dropped to 0-7 in overall and 0-3 in district play after that loss to Pottsboro last week. And Whitesboro tried to take down Palmer, tried to set up the scenario we wanted with the potential for a 3-way tie or for Whitesboro to gain the district title by themselves. But unfortunately, they were unable to hold off Palmer and came up with a 41-33 loss. So they are 4-3 overall and 2-1 in district play. And again, this is the same tale that we had with Pottsboro taking on what is obviously the best team in the district at this point, playing them tough, having a lead, 21-7 at halftime, but Palmer comes out in the third quarter, gets 3 touchdowns, is able to open things up there, and able to actually hang on as Whitesboro gets it to the final margin at 8 points to potentially force an overtime. But a valiant effort there. Again, it's the pecking order has started to shake out. Both Pottsboro and Whitesboro still have to play Pilot Point going into this week and then next week. So it feels like it's gonna be pretty obvious that Palmer is the one, the winner of Pottsboro. Whitesboro is going to be the 2. And again, a good showing by the Whitesboro offense. Colt Fagan, 13 of 25 passing for 213 yards with a touchdown. He also had 11 carries for 46 yards and a score. Camden Stevens had 2 catches for 58 yards and a touchdown. He also ran for a touchdown. Braden Bomar didn't get in the end zone, but had 7 catches for 110 yards. Levi Weddle had a touchdown run on the ground. And it was just one of those games. You have that one bad quarter, and obviously that can change a lot of things. But again, it's much like we saw last week. I think it's on the road compared to Pottsboro playing at home. But again, that's a game you have to go down. You have to win. You have the opportunity to just bank a win, which you may need. And then, like I said, you're going to play Pilot Point the next week, and then you've got Pottsboro waiting at the end. So you can't overlook these next 2. Like I said, depending on what happens, Pilot Point's going to come into that matchup with Whitesboro saying, hey, if we win, we have a chance at the 3rd seed. So, again, as long as Whitesboro takes care of business, we have that showdown setting up at the last week. But You got to go on the road. You got to beat a team that hasn't won a game, and you're coming off obviously a tough loss. So we'll see what Whitesboro looks like as they go down to Dallas A+ Academy, 7:30 on Friday for that 6-3A Division I contest. Moving over to District 7-3A Division II, we have all of the teams playing in this district this week, and we have an all-local game, and that is the Bells Panthers hosting SNS. Bells comes into this game at 4-4 and 2-2 after they lost 33-15 against Blue Ridge, and SNS lost 55-14 against Leonard, so they are 0-7 and 0-3 in district play. So heading into the final weeks of this district, Bells finds itself in an unfamiliar position. They are currently in 4th place, and they are sitting behind the two undefeated teams, 3-0, Gunner and Blue Ridge, and we'll talk about them in a second because that's a huge game this week. And Leonard is sitting at 3-1. Leonard has the bye this week, so they're just going to kind of hang out and see what happens around them. Bells is sitting at 2-2. Howe is at 1-3, and then SNS and Callisburg are tied at 0-3. Now, Bells cannot clinch with a win. SNS can be eliminated with a loss. And Bells is in good shape. They've already beaten Howe. If they beat SNS, they still have to play Leonard. So that's a huge potential swing game for seeding purposes. It looks like things are shaping up to where Gunner and Blue Ridge are obviously looking at 1-2. Leonard still has a chance, but it's going to be tough based on their schedule because while they have the bye this week and they get to hang out, they finish with Gunner. So you have to assume that's going to give them a second loss after they've already lost to Blue Ridge. So it's a big deal for Bells to kind of hang out because Bells plays Leonard next week, and then Bells has the bye. So if Bells wins out, they're basically the 3 seed, assuming Gunner does what Gunner does in the final game against Leonard. And so you've got a team again that is coming off that loss, 33-15. Easton Branham scores both of the touchdowns in the game for Bells. Jadarius Washington had 10 carries for 74 yards. Bryson Thompson, 16 carries for 69 yards. And Jackson Brown, 8 carries for 34 yards. Branham with 4 for 30 and has the 2 short touchdown runs. This was a game where there was a lot of action early, and Bells is only down 21-15, but then Blue Ridge scores twice in the second half to break the game open. And it's unfamiliar territory because Bells has not lost to anybody other than Gunner since those two have been put in the district together. We talked about that with whenever realignment has been around in this district, to where Gunner's on, and we'll talk about Gunner in a minute, but Gunner's on this really long winning streak in district play since they started this run of state championships and going deep in the playoffs and playing for championships, to where they have not been beaten in district play, and the only team that has been able to beat Bells in that time is Gunner. It's the first time since 2018 that somebody other than Gunner beat Bells in a district game. It's always been, we always look at the end of the season, we go, Gunner's number 1, Bells is the 2 seed, and then whoever is the 3rd, and that's the way that district has gone. So it's an unfamiliar position. Obviously, we've talked about Bells is dealing with, still a ton of injuries. They've, especially with what they run in slot T, you've got to have multiple running backs. They've still done well. They're still averaging, over 275 yards on the ground, which is what you expect out of them. But they have had to rely on some new faces. They have had to work some new guys in because of that, and obviously some of those guys play defense as well. So that kind of changes the dynamic on that side of the ball as well. But they control their destiny. They can win out and they're in. They can probably win this week and they're in. There's some scenarios that need to happen because of the way the schedule lays out. But like I said, all they have to do is win their last 2 games and they're in, and that'll probably lock up the 3 seed. For SNS, again coming off the loss 55-14 against Leonard. Huge game for Joe Orr. 7 catches for 219 yards and 2 touchdowns. Hunter Corville, 11 of 28 passing for 266 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Kenny Melton led the way on the ground with 9 carries for 29 yards. And that was the story of this game. It was the Joe Orr show. He had 2 long touchdowns, a lot of the yardage, and unfortunately, neither team actually, surprisingly, did a whole lot on the ground. It was a lot of passing. Leonard threw for almost 300 yards, but they got some stops along the way. They got a kickoff return for a touchdown, and they were able to get up 42-0 at halftime. And again, Leonard's in a good spot, sitting at 3-1, and sitting on the bye this week. So they're just kind of gonna see what happens, especially in that Blue Ridge Gunner matchup. And then obviously if they want to see if Bells can slip up along the way before they have to face them. And like I said, that game's going to be a huge one for them. And again, we talk about SNS. It seems like every week, they have their flashes, they have their moments, they have some good efforts. They just can't put it all together right now. I think they have a chance in that game. They still have to play Callisburg. It would be a great way for them to find a way to win that game. That would be the last game of the season to end this long losing streak, get some momentum going into the offseason. They have Gunner next week, so obviously that's a super tough task to ask them to break their losing streak there. But I think that Callisburg game it could be something to watch at the end. And again, if they want to stay in it, they've got to win this week. And they know that, but again, it's also tough when you haven't beaten anybody, and then you say, well, you got to win all the games left on your schedule. So I think we'll probably see some, the continued improvement, for SNS based off what we've seen the last, especially last year. They just haven't been able to put it all together. And like I said, Bells is hungry. Even if they were in the spot they normally are in, they knew that, you have to win to maintain it. So I don't think this game, regardless on the schedule, based on Bells' record, was going to change their mindset any, because they need to win to keep pace. And in this case, it's to keep pace to try to keep a playoff spot. So that's the all-local matchup, SNS at Bells, 7:30 on Friday in 7-3A Division II action. Now, the big game in this district, obviously, like we said, there's a couple games this week that have huge district title implications. And in this district, that's on the line this week. Undefeated Gunner at 3-0 in this district, 5-2 overall after they beat Howe 65-7 last week. And Blue Ridge, obviously, with the win against Bells, 33-15. They are 6-1, and they are also 3-0. So this essentially is probably going to decide the district title. Gunner still has to play Leonard, so hypothetically there is a chance there could be a 3-way tie somewhere in this. But obviously the winner of this certainly has the upper hand going in the last couple of weeks. Gunner has won 10 straight against Blue Ridge. 5 of those have been by shutout. That includes the last 2 games. Last year, this was a 54-0 Gunner win. We've talked about Blue Ridge a couple times just because they've already played a couple of local teams. Their only losses to Honeygrove. They have already had their best season since 2019, and it's their 3rd winning season since 2010. So they're probably going to make the playoffs. They're having one of their best seasons in a while, and they haven't beaten Gunner since 1991. So Gunner's in a good place. They've been in a really good place on this 4-game winning streak since those consecutive losses, and last week was no exception, beating Howe 65-7. Again, this was a game that was 51-0 at halftime, and spreading it out like they always do. Preston Tarpley, 9 of 11 passing for 175 yards and 2 touchdowns. Dylan Tokar's had a touchdown off a receiver pass that went to Colin Peacock, who had 3 catches for 77 yards, and he had a touchdown from Tarpley as well, so he had 2 touchdowns. Mitchell Gage, 3 catches for 76 yards. Boston Standards' only catch was a 25-yard touchdown. Jake Campiti led the way on the ground, 3 rushes for 93 yards and 2 scores. Brock Body, 4 carries for 50 yards and a touchdown. Tokar's added his only run was a 29-yard touchdown. Hayden Farrell got in on the action with a touchdown as well, and Jarrett Wagner in the second half was able to find the end zone. He got some time at quarterback, was able to score on a keeper there. So again, Gunner is back to Gunner. They put up over 500 yards in this one. Very efficient. They have dominated since district play started. They have allowed 6 points, 0 points, and 7 points, and they are in line to do what they continue to do, and which is win district games. I believe if they win this week, it is 54 in a row, but again, you have a Blue Ridge team that is going to pull out all the stops. They know this is probably their best chance in a while to try to win this game, and they won that huge swing game against Leonard a couple weeks ago, and so they're probably saying, why not us? And they're gonna put all the stops. They've got a good quarterback. They've got a good passing game, and we'll see what Gunner does. I think obviously a lot of people expect Gunner to win, which is the likely story. And it's been a while since they've gotten to this point in district play where somebody actually has a better record than them on the season and has played them toe to toe in district play. So that's a huge swing. That's a huge game in terms of deciding the district title. 7:30 on Friday. Blue Ridge at Gunner in 7-3A Division II action. And then the last game in this district, I'm talking about Howe going to Callisburg. Howe, like we said, lost 65-7 against Gunner, so they are now 3-5 and 1-3 in district play, while Callisburg is 2-5 and 0-3 in district play. They did not play last week, and the loser of this game would be eliminated if Bells beats SNS. So if Bells beats SNS, the loser of this game. So this is basically an elimination game going into it. And if you're Howe, you still have some hope. You've got to win out though. So obviously you've got to beat Callisburg. You've got to beat Blue Ridge the last week. That's obviously going to be a tough task, and you may need some help. But you're, like I said, if you win, you're mathematically in it for another week, and that's all you can ask. And if you're Callisburg, you're going, hey, we got to find a way to win. Obviously playing Gunner is tough is a tough game to come off of, and Howe still dealing with injuries to some key guys, especially on the offensive side. Braden Ulmer again out this week for the Bulldogs in that loss to Gunner. James Cowart led the way rushing, 11 carries for 66 yards. Bryce Piper, 11 carries for 33 yards, and he scored the lone touchdown for Howe. And it's one of those things where you just kind of shrug it off, and you got to move on because you got, like I said, you've got games that are still important to you in these last couple of weeks. So huge game for both those teams, and like I said, the winners got a chance to stay alive. The loser's probably going to be eliminated after the results on Friday. So hopefully Howe can stay alive for another week. It's going to be, like I said, it's going to be a tough finish to try to make that happen, but I think they've got a chance here. It's on the road, 7:30 on Friday, going to Callisburg, and we'll see what happens in that 7-3A Division II contest to see who stays alive in the playoffs going into the final couple weeks of the season. Down at the 2A level, we have all three teams playing in 6-2A Division I, and we will talk about the game involving the team that did not play last week, because that's the big game in this district. Another situation where you have two undefeated teams. This does not get sole possession of first place like those other two. But Tioga returns to action this week, 7 o'clock on Friday, as they host Alvord. Like we said, Tioga had their bye last week. They got to see all the stuff that happened in the district. And Alvord won 24-13 against Whitewright. So they are 4-4 on the season, but most importantly, they are 4-0 in district play. We talked about them coming into this district. They were a playoff team. They've been in contention for district titles. They were 0-4 coming into district, but what did that mean? And obviously that's proving not much because, again, another strong defensive effort for Alvord in district play. Again, you look at their four wins. They shut out Nakona. They shut out Trenton. They held Tom Bean to 7 points, and then last week they held Whitewright to 13 points, and they clinched a playoff spot. They are in no matter what, but now they're chasing the district title, as is Tioga, and it shakes out this way. You've got 4-0 to Alvord. You've got Tioga at 3-0, 5-2 on the season, and Wolf City is also 3-0, and Whitewright is sitting in 4th place. So obviously that means Tioga and Alvord still have to play Wolf City. This is a district title that's probably going to come down to the wire, but the winner this week has a huge advantage. Alvord, obviously, because they've only got 2 games left. They have the bye next week when Tioga and Wolf City play. So Alvord's going to go into that final game against Wolf City knowing exactly where they stand, especially if they win this game. They will know if they have at least a share of the district title locked up. Are they going to have to, if they win, will they get it outright? Is there going to be a chance for a 3-way tie, depending on how things shake out? So they're in a really good spot, but they've already clinched a playoff spot. If Tioga wins, they will clinch a playoff spot this week. If they lose, they might still. I'm not doing scenarios this week for the 4 things that have to happen, or this has to happen with this team or whatever. This is the kind of the cut and dry stuff this week. We'll obviously get more into the nitty gritty the next couple weeks, but it's very simple for Tioga. If you win, you're in, which is the first starting point for them at the beginning of the season. Hey, we want to go back to the playoffs, make another deep run. You got to get in the top 4 somehow. And like we said, at the very least, if the winner of this game stays undefeated, and depending on what Wolf City does, that you're guaranteed to either be tied for first place with them, or you could be alone in first place. So it's a huge swing game. It's at Tioga, so that's obviously a nice little bonus for them. Not that it means anything. You want to compare years and all that sort of stuff. Tioga won this game 61-12 last year, which was a big part of them being able to be up there at the top of the standings. If Tioga does that again, that says a lot about how good this offense is back on track, because they had the quarterback issues with injuries. That side of the ball is a lot healthier than it was a month ago, let alone a couple weeks ago. They had another week to maybe get some guys back because of the bye, and so we'll see what that looks like. But again, it's sort of you get a hot offense against a really hot defense. Something's got to give, and the winners in, like I said, really good shape for the 6-2A Division I title. And we'll find out when Tioga hosts Alvord at 7 p.m. on Friday night. The next game we'll talk about in this district, Whitewright hosting Wolf City. You have the Tigers sitting at 5-2 overall and 1-2 in district play after they lost that game against Alvord last week, 24-13. And Wolf City wins a thriller against Tom Bean, 28-27. So they are 6-1 on the season and 3-0 in district play, as we just mentioned. So Wolf City is in the same spot as Tioga. If they win, they clinch a playoff spot, which is what a lot of people thought they would do in this district, is find a way to, if not make the playoffs, be near the top of the standings. And so they're doing that. And again, if you're Wolf City, as long as you win, you're guaranteed that at least one of the other 3 that's undefeated is going to lose this week, and you have to play both of them the next couple of weeks. So this is a big game for Wolf City in that regard, and it's a big game for Whitewright, because White currently sitting in 4th place, sitting at 1-2 after these two losses, after the 5-0 start. Again, you're playing an Albert team that's been really good defensively, showing it again last week against White. Again, this was a game relatively close, scoreless after the first quarter. Albert's up 14-6 at halftime. No score in the third quarter, so you get a tight game. Going to the fourth quarter, Albert gets up 24-6. White able to score late, but isn't able to get any closer. In that regard, Easton Helgren had 5 catches for 86 yards and a touchdown. Colt Yancey, 9 of 18 passing for 107 yards and that touchdown. Gage Walker scored on the ground, only had 23 yards on 8 carries. It was very tough sledding for White. Not even 150 yards of offense. Their defense did well enough to keep them in the game, through 3 quarters. They just weren't able to get enough offense going. And kind of the opposite of the loss to Tioga. That was obviously the shootout, back and forth, some big plays. This was kind of a defensive slog for 3 quarters. And so White sitting here at 1-2, and they've got 4th place by themselves, but they still have a game against Trenton coming up. That's the last game of the season for them, and they need to try to stay ahead of Trenton at the very least. Again, if you want to look big picture, if White loses this week, as long as they win their last 2, which is against Trenton and Nakona, then they'll get a playoff spot. But those are also the 2 teams that are right behind you in the standings, and so they're going to have something to play for. And just looking at the teams in the district, Trenton has the bye this week, so they're just kind of hang out. And we'll talk about Nakona because they're playing Tom Bean. So you have 2 teams. You have a Nakona team going into their matchup this week that basically knows they need to win. And then if they win, they're playing you the next week, you being White. And then Trenton plays Tom Bean, and then Trenton and White play. So the last playoff spot is up for grabs with the way the schedule plays out. And if you can pull off a win against Wolf City, that's a huge feather in your cap going into the last couple games. But again, you might still have to win those games, so you're not you don't want to lose a tiebreaker against either of them. But you've got a chance to get back on track. I was kind of surprised that the Tom Bean game last week was as close as it was, and we'll talk about some reasons why when we get to that in a second. But Wolf City's got a really good rushing attack. Again, we've talked about them last week. They have beaten everybody but Collinsville, and obviously we'll talk about Collinsville in a minute. They just continue to roll along. About if White can do some damage control on the ground and limit H.D. Davis, who has been a monster for Wolf City. He's run for at least 200 yards in every game except the first game, and that his worst game is 173 yards. And he's coming off a 300-yard game last week. So if you can find a way to slow him down, at least minimize his effect on the game, you might have a chance. Like I said, Wolf City had to go down the wire against Tom Bean, and that may make you feel better because obviously you won a close game against Tom Bean to start district play. So, but that's a big game obviously because you have a team tied for second and the 4th place team playing Wolf City at White at 7:00 on Friday, District 6-2A Division 1 action. And then the last game, like I mentioned, Nakona and Tom Bean. Tom Bean's hosting this one at 7:00 on Friday at Tomcat Stadium. Tom Bean's 4-4. They're 0-4 after that nail-biting loss to Wolf City. And Nakona is coming off a 22-0 loss against Trenton. If Tom Bean were to lose, they would be eliminated from the playoffs. They only have the 2 games left because they have a bye the last week of the season. So they're going to play Nakona this week and then Trenton the last week. So they have to win out and probably get some help. But they're alive if they win. They're out if they lose. They're playing a team in Nakona that's really struggled to score points. Nakona has been shut out 3 times. They've been held to 6 points or less in 5 of the 6 losses, and their only win is against SNS. So it's a team that struggled to score points. Their defense has been kind of hit or miss. Like you see last week, they only gave up 22 points, but you're not going to win if you can't score. So that's where they are against Nakona. Last week against Wolf City, an interesting result. Ultimately comes down to some missed extra points as being the difference. Tommy had to make a change. Donnie Hooten did not play a quarterback, so they shift Bobby Rogers, who played there last year, and they did relatively well. Again, they put up, they scored 4 touchdowns. He had 3 of them on the ground. He had 20, but Rogers with 25 carries for 138 yards and 3 touchdowns. Hagan Darney 3 carries for 106 yards. Dallas Peavy had the other touchdown on the ground. Rogers was 8 of 21 passing for 93 yards and an interception. Dyson Ferris led there, 3 catches for 39 yards. McGuire Poole, 2 catches for 35 yards, also had 2 carries for 30 yards. So 4 touches for 65 yards, pretty good there. But again, like we said, they had trouble stopping Wolf City's rushing attack, which ran for almost 350 yards. H.G. Davis with a huge game there, 36 carries for 305 yards. And again, this was a game that was close. That if Tom Bean had been able to go to overtime or been able to win the game, then the bottom of this district, the bottom 4, we're talking about a whole new ball game in terms of who could try to make the playoffs. And again, it's been a heartache for a couple of these Tom Bean games. They've lost by 3 to Alvord in that defensive game, 10-7. They lose this game by a point. They lose to Whitewright by 4 points. So, and obviously the Tioga game wasn't very close, but they could easily be sitting here 3-1. The difference in those 3 losses is literally 8 points. So it's been a tough district stretch for a team that thought they were going to be in the mix for the playoffs, and like I said, they still technically are, but they've there's only 3 or 4 plays that they probably look at and say that's the difference between us being in the playoffs or not, and depending on the quarterback situation, obviously that changes some things around, because from the looks of it, obviously if Rogers is going to be a quarterback, that means he's not a running back. If Hagan Darney is getting carries in the backfield, then he's not being available as a wide receiver, although if you're averaging 32 yards a carry, that's pretty good in the lone touches that you get. But obviously it's getting late early for Tom Bean. They got to win this week to stay alive. They got to win against Trenton to stay in the mix, and even that might not be enough. They're gonna get some help to force that tiebreaker. But we'll see. Stranger things have happened, and districts get crazy, and people start, the results start coming in that you might need. But Tom Bean's got to get a win as they host Nakona, 7 o'clock on Friday in 6-2A Division I action. The last couple games here, we've got in District 8-2A Division II, the Collinsville Pirates are going on the road to take on Era at 7 p.m. on Friday night. Collinsville is 7-0 and 2-0 in district play after they won 55-21 against Lindsay. And Era is 4-3 and 1-1 in district play after they lost 64-6 against Munster. So I say it every week. Collinsville just rolling along, doing what they do. They actually got a little pushback from Lindsay this week. They were up 21-0 after the first quarter. It looked like this was going to be a runaway, and it looked like all the other Collinsville games that we've seen. Lindsay scores back-to-back touchdowns in the second quarter to make it 21-14, and it looks like it might be game on. And so you're sitting there thinking, man, this is a 7-point game, and Collinsville comes up with 2 touchdowns in the final 3 minutes of the second quarter to get that up to 34-14, and then they hold Lindsay to just 1 touchdown in the second half, and that comes late in the fourth quarter as they're able to build up a 55-14 lead and pull away there in the second half. Garrett Trevino with the big game for the Pirates, 17 carries, 116 yards and 4 touchdown runs. He also had a halfback pass to Chad Davidson, 58 yards for a touchdown. Paxton Davidson recovers a blocked punt in the end zone for a touchdown. Cash Morgan with a touchdown catch from J.J. Jenkins. Chad Davidson finished with 3 catches for 110 yards. Cash Morgan 4 catches for 69 yards in that touchdown. Jenkins 8 of 14 passing for 135 yards and the 1 touchdown. Brandon Cantu added a touchdown on the ground as well, as he finished with 5 carries for 44 yards. And again, the Collinsville offense has been really good, and the defense, you hate to say this is one of their worst games of the season, but when you're ranked as the number 2 team in 2A Division 2, you sit here and say, if the 21 points is one of our worst games, we're doing something right. And again, they're 2-0 in district play. Munster is 2-0 in district play. That obviously setting up that showdown next week, which is the big game. It's at Collinsville, and it's going to decide at the very least who gets the number 1 seed. If not, who should probably go undefeated and on the way to a district title. You've got Aaron and Santo sitting at 1-1. Lindsay and Chico are both 0-2, and obviously from a playoff standpoint, Collinsville and Munster are in very good shape. When you look at Era, they're having a pretty good season for them. They had only won 1 game each of the last 2 years. It's already their best season since 2018 by being at 4-3. They've got a chance to be in the mix for a playoff spot. Obviously, it's going to come down to probably their games against Santo and Lindsay to finish up. They've got Lindsay the last game of the season. But that's probably they're in a good position. And again, if you're Collinsville, the big thing about this week. And I guess you could probably say it about Munster too, because they're going on the road to Santo. That don't look ahead to next week. Don't think it's in the bag, and obviously everyone's excited about what happens with that game next week. Go out and play your game. Do what you've been doing, and don't overlook an opponent that is having a lot of success compared to what it normally has, and they would love nothing more than to spoil your chance for what everybody hopes is. And just based on the rankings, Collinsville is number 2 in the Dave Campbell's rankings. Munster's number 3. So you're probably going to have number 2 versus number 3 as long as both those teams take care of business. So just don't get caught looking ahead. But again, Collinsville's having an amazing season. They've yet to lose. And obviously, the only thing that stands between them and probably an undefeated regular season is that game against Munster next week. But again, don't get caught looking ahead. Just keep doing what you're doing. You've had a success against Era. Even though you're going on the road 7:00 on Friday in this 8-2A Division 2 matchup, just kind of keep doing what you're doing. So we get to that big showdown next week, and everybody in the state's going to be looking at that game for sure. And then the last game on the list is Texoma Christian in their TAPS 6-man Division 3 District 3 contest. They will be hosting Greenville Christian on Friday night at 7:30. Texoma Christian is 2-0 on the season, 1-0 after they opened district last week with a 69-0 win against Dallas Fairhill. And Greenville Christian had a bye. They are 2-4 on the season, and they are 1-0 in district play. Their last time out, they beat Dallas Fairhill 60-12. So, excuse me, 49-12. And so this is a big game in this district because based on the way the standings are, and there's only 4 teams in this district, and only 2 are guaranteed to go to the playoffs, the winner of this game clinches a playoff spot. They've both beaten Dallas Fairhill, so if you win this game, you'll have beaten 2 of the 3 teams. They both still have Longview Christian Heritage, who is considered the favorite to win the district. But again, you only have to get in the top 2 to at least clinch a playoff spot. And TCS is in a good spot. Again, 69-0 last week against Dallas Fairhill. Nate Reed, 5 of 7 passing for 115 yards and 3 touchdowns. He also ran for a 16-yard touchdown. Jake Squires, 4 carries, 86 yards and 2 touchdowns. Brody Stokes, 2 catches, 65 yards and a touchdown. Robert Phillips, 2 catches for 39 yards and a touchdown. Cade Alley added a touchdown catch. And a really good start for Texoma Christian. Again, they haven't played a lot of games. Some people have canceled on them. Some people haven't been able to fulfill their obligations. And so they've only played 2 games. They were only going to play a maximum of 6 anyway. So they're going to end up playing 4 games on the season. But again, if you win the games you're supposed to, you need to, then you're going to go to the playoffs. And Greenville Christian, again, in the same spot as well. Coming into this game, they have a chance to lock down a playoff spot, and then the winner of this is going to play Longview Heritage either this week or next week, depending on who it is, to end up closing out the season, have a chance to win the district title. Now, if you lose this game, you're not out of it. The third place team in this district is in the running for a wild card. It's weird because it's TAPS, and they have a point system and a whole thing and whatever and blah, blah, blah. So even if you lose, you're not eliminated. Dallas Fairhill is out. They're done. There's no way Dallas Fairhill can make the playoffs. They've only got the game against Longview Christian Heritage left anyway, so they're done. But the winner of this is in. The loser is still alive. And obviously, if they somehow were to pull the upset over an undefeated Longview Christian Heritage team, they might get the second spot on a tiebreaker, potentially, or get a playoff spot on a tiebreaker. But it's real simple. The winner is in. The loser is still going to be alive. And then we just have to wait and see whatever crazy system and what people do in some other districts and how that'll work out. But again, Texoma Christian's in a really good spot. They have not allowed a touchdown in the 2 games that they've played. They have won both of their games in blowout fashion, and it looks like the plan is working to be able to get them into the playoffs. It's kind of weird, like I said, that they're only going to play the 4 games, but in the long run, it maybe end up worth it. So we'll see what happens. Again, it's a game at home, so that helps. And you're playing a team that hasn't played in a couple weeks. So we'll see what happens when Texoma Christian hosts Greenville Christian for TAPS 6-man Division III, District 3 action on Friday nights. So that is a look back at Week 8. That's a look at what is in store for Week 9. Thank you for listening to the latest edition of the podcast. You can follow along all the action. Follow me on Twitter /X at Jason De La Rosa. You can follow our Facebook pages, either the Herald Democrat Facebook page or the All-Texomaland Facebook page. If you just want to see whatever's happening on the high school sports scene, All-Texomaland Facebook page, that's the place to go. Everything gets posted there. You get your results, you get your stories, you get the info you need, whatever's going on. So check out those places for the info on the social media. Enjoy whatever game you're at. I think it's going to be hopefully the last warm football game of the year, even though the season's almost over. We're still looking at close to 90. And come on back next week for the latest edition of the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast.